This is the Easy Betting Show. My name is Easy, and I'm talking college football again. This is part two of three parts for week one. And if you missed part one, stay here. Don't leave. Finish this one up. It's not going to be that long of an episode because I know the games start in an hour and a half. So check this one out, and then you can go back and watch part one, which are the picks for today, and then get those in. Today, I am going to be talking about the early part of the Saturday slate. There's 67 games on Saturday. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of them in one show. We would be here for hours. So I did the games before 7 o'clock on Saturday as a part of this slate that I'm doing, and I picked my top 10 games from the games before 7. Mainly because there just wasn't really a lot that I liked in this slate, other than the ones obviously that I'm going to be talking about. But a lot of them were just games that I didn't want to touch, so I'm not going to. Pretty simple with that. But like I said, there are 10 that I do like and I do have bets for, and a couple I'm going to have multiple bets for, multiple being two, because again, just like in part one, if you watch that one, I'm not doing player props for this one either, mainly because I'm in a state where you can't do player props, and I only put out plays here that I bet myself. And so in the future, if you do see me putting player props in these shows, it'll be because I drove to North Carolina and put them in myself. Not doing that today, so just going to be doing the games. But with that, let's go ahead and get right into the games because I know the games start here shortly and I want to watch them as much as y'all do. So I don't want to take too much time. The first game that I'm going to be talking about is probably the biggest one of the weekend. Clemson at Georgia. The spread is 13.5 for Georgia. The over-under is 48.5. This obviously is going to be the best game of not necessarily the best game of the weekend, but the most important game of the weekend. Obviously, it has playoff implications in week one. Both of these teams are slated to make the playoff, although I don't see Clemson making the playoff myself, but of course that I'm probably in the minority there. I do think this is more of a must-win game for Clemson than it is for Georgia. Now, when I say more of a must-win, I'm not calling it a must-win game for them, but it's definitely more important for them. The SEC is going to get at minimum 3 teams into the college football playoff this year. The ACC will be lucky to get 2. They'll probably get 1, maybe get 2 if they're lucky, if everybody plays well. Well, the ACC also has like 8 teams this year that could make the ACC championship. So Clemson has a lot of competition this year, and they have a pretty tough schedule in comparison to a lot of the other ACC teams that have relatively easy schedules, like Virginia Tech, Louisville, NC State, even Florida State, really. Of course, they do have that loss to Georgia Tech now, so that can implicate different things. But I think this is a big game for Clemson. Obviously, it's a big game for Georgia, too, because they want to stay ranked number 1. But if they lose this game, it doesn't impact them as much as I think it impacts Clemson potentially based off of the schedule and how many teams are going to make the playoffs. So that doesn't really mean much for the game. It's just how I feel about the two teams. As for the actual game itself, I think on the offensive side of the ball for Clemson, it's mainly going to depend on what Cade Klubnik does at quarterback. He hasn't really done a ton in his career, and I don't really trust him personally. He does have a lot of guys around him. The offensive line is going to be good. They did get TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco to help him out. They brought back Phil Maffa in the run game, which will obviously help him. On the defensive side of the ball, I think it's going to be their young defensive line that could either make or break this game. They're very young, and that's potentially a question mark for them. Obviously, Georgia's offensive line is going to be unbelievably good. It always is. So can they get any pressure at all on Carson Beck to impact this game? I don't know if they will. And even if they do, Carson Beck's really good at quarterback. They returned 7 starters on offense from last year. Obviously, Carson Beck is one of them. Like I said, really talented offensive line. The receiver room is decently deep, which, of course, they're Georgia. They also got Trevor Etienne from Florida. I don't know if he's going to play in this one. But even if he doesn't, they have other guys that can pick up the slack until he comes back. So the trouble that he's been in could affect them a little bit, but shouldn't affect them too much. On the defensive side of the ball for Georgia, they're going to be great. They always are. I know they lost some pieces to the NFL draft. They lose pieces to the NFL draft every year, but they're still going to be a Georgia defense. So I'm taking Georgia minus 13.5. I got it at minus 114. So I'm going to put 1.2 units on this to win a unit. For those of you that didn't watch part 1, I am going to be saying the units that I'm putting on each play just for transparency reasons and because I track all of my units anyway. So I might as well put them on here. So together we can see how many units I'm winning, losing each day and throughout the season. So Georgia minus 13.5, minus 114, 1.2 units. Also, I'm not going to bet this one, but I like the under in this game. I think 48.5 is just a little bit high. With Georgia's defense that they have, Clemson's offense could sputter some and not be able to move the ball as much. And obviously, I think Clemson's going to get some stops too. Normally, when Georgia and Clemson play each other, it's typically low-scoring games every time they play. So there's no reason to think that this one isn't going to be the exact same thing. It could be like 24-10. That'd probably be my guess, 24-10. Sounds right. Next game I'm going to be talking about is another good one, another one that a lot of people are excited about. Penn State at West Virginia. Penn State is 8.5-point favorites right now, and the over-under in this one is 51.5. This game's going to be a lot of fun. I mean, the game itself is going to be good, but the crowd is going to be nuts. This stadium is going to be fucking crazy. And this is exactly the type of atmosphere you want to have in a week 1 game. West Virginia did lose 38-15 at Happy Valley last year, so this could potentially be a revenge spot for them, especially with the crowd behind them, which I think helps them a lot. But this is probably going to be a tough game for West Virginia. They typically start a little bit slow. They do have a lot of guys returning from last year. Actually, both of these teams have a lot of guys returning from last year. Drew Aller is one of them for Penn State, who I don't trust at all. And I also don't trust James Franklin at all. So the two of them together is worrying. But that being said, I do actually like Penn State to cover this game for a bunch of different reasons. Penn State last year had the 3rd fewest turnovers in the FBS, only giving 8 balls away. And on the other side of the ball, the Mountaineers only forced 16, which was the 42nd fewest in the FBS. So that's probably going to maintain that pace. Even though I don't trust Drew Aller, he doesn't turn the ball over a whole lot, which is good for a game like this in an atmosphere like they're going to have. They also have Abdul Carter on defense, who is potentially one of the better defensive players this year. I mean, he's going to be really good for this team. And he's most likely going to make a game-changing play at some point in this game. Now, for the West Virginia side, they do probably have the best O-line in the Big 12 this year, if not one of the best for sure. They bring back Jaheim White, who ran for over 800 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's probably going to have an even bigger role this year than he did last year, which should help them. They have Garrett Green at quarterback, which I don't really know a ton about, to be honest with you. So not really going to talk about him. And then the defensive front, they were pretty good at getting to the quarterback last year. That should probably maintain this year, especially with having linebacker Ben Cutter still on the team. But I just don't think it's going to be enough for them. I think it is tight most way through the game, and then probably in the fourth quarter, Penn State, you know, jumps ahead a little bit. I got Penn State winning by 10. That's my prediction. So Penn State minus 8.5. I got those odds at minus 105, which are pretty nice odds. So I'm going to put 1.1 unit on that. The over under at 51.5 is, I don't know, probably about right. So I'm not going to touch that. Yeah, Garrett Green anytime touchdown. That's not a bad look either. That's definitely something that if I could put player props in, because Virginia's like the fact that Virginia did all of this betting shit and then said, but we're not going to let you do player props for no reason. It's so stupid. Like, but I don't know. In future weeks, I'm just going to drive down to the Carolina border and put some in. So in future videos, I will have player props. All right. Next game that I'm going to be talking about is Illinois State at Iowa. Now, this is one that nobody really gives a shit about, and it's for obvious reasons. You know, ranked team against Illinois State. But I think this is going to be an interesting game, though. The spread is minus 22.5 towards Iowa. The over-under is 40.5 right now. And obviously, the question on everyone's minds for this team is, will Iowa have an offense this year? Well, I don't know. It's probably going to be better than last year, though. So, obviously, with this offense, better doesn't mean good, but better does mean better. They still have Cade McNamara there, who isn't a win you the game guy, but he is a don't lose you the game guy, which a team like Iowa that relies on their defense, that's what you want. So that'll definitely, continue to help them out. But of course, the story for Iowa is their defense. They're going to be extremely good again, like they are every year in the past. The big news for Iowa, if you haven't seen this, is Ferentz is suspended for this game because of that bullshit recruiting violation stuff that didn't make any sense to most people. So the offense might not look as good in this game as it will in future games, obviously because it's the first game of the season, but because Ferentz isn't going to be there either. So the offense could kind of sputter a little bit because he's not there. So I say that they're probably going to look like Iowa of last year in this game on Saturday. Now, on the other side of the ball, Illinois State has a good offense. They averaged close to 6 yards a carry on the ground last year, but obviously they won't be able to do that against Iowa's defensive line. So they probably won't be able to do much in this game. I don't think that really surprises anybody, but their offense is probably going to struggle. The defensive side of the ball, though, is actually a different story for Illinois State. They've been really good the last few seasons, and they should probably be just as good this year. They have an elite linebacker core with Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, and that's really going to help them out a lot against an already not great Iowa team. So because of that, basically just two good defenses going against each other, I'm actually going to bet the under 40.5 on this one. It's minus 110, so I'm going to put 1.1 units on this. I know a lot of people just kind of auto bet Iowa under games, and it makes sense. It's never a bad bet. But because the spread is so big on this one, you're actually getting a decent number at 40.5. Whereas, normally Iowa in Big Ten games, the total's like 24 or some crazy shit. So definitely going to utilize the high number for an Iowa over under and take the under 40.5. I would lean Illinois State plus 22.5 if you want to take the spread on this one as well. I'm not going to bet it because I like the under more. But yeah, Iowa to be favored by more than 3 touchdowns just seems like a lot against any team. I mean, they played multiple games last year where they didn't score an offensive touchdown. That pretty much tells you everything you need to know. Next game is Austin P at Louisville. Lovell. I don't know. Depends on how you want to say it. Louisville is 36.5 point favorites in this one, and the over-under is 52.5. Obviously, they're expecting a blowout in this one. It's probably going to be a blowout in this one. But you got to remember, Austin P isn't a terrible FCS team. They're a fringe top 25 preseason polls right now. They did make the playoffs last year, but they also lost their coach from last year. So it's Jeff Ferris that comes in from Duke in his first year. They also had a lot of turnover on the roster last year. So a lot of new guys, first year coach. I don't really see him doing a whole lot, especially against this Louisville team. On defense, their secondary is loaded. A lot of veteran guys, a lot of talented guys. That's really going to help them out. And they also have a good pass rush. So their defense is probably going to be a strong point for this team, which I haven't really seen a whole lot of because a lot of people that talk about Louisville so far just talk about Tyler Shuck, which is warranted because you don't really know what he's going to do this year. I don't have as much faith in him as a lot of people do, but I don't know. I mean, he's definitely going to be better than Jack Plummer was last year, so that's always a positive. I think the defense is going to be kind of the characteristic of this team this year, and they're going to rely on that, not to Iowa's extent, obviously, but kind of like Iowa does to a degree. Like I said, on offense, Tyler Shuck comes in as their quarterback. He's probably going to try to show off in this one because it is Austin Peay's defense that he's going up against. So he'll look good in this one, but in the future, I don't know if he'll look good or not. The thing for Shuck, in my opinion, is going to be the offensive line in front of him. They didn't give Plummer any damn time to throw last year. They got Jack Plummer beat the fuck up last year. So if they do that again this year for Shuck, who is an injury-prone guy, they're probably screwed for the season. But in this one, I'm taking Louisville minus 36.5. I just think they're going to beat the hell out of a brand new team, basically. And you can't rely on what Austin Peay did last year, even though it was a surprise to a lot of people. So Louisville minus 36.5. I grabbed that at minus 112. So I'm going to put 1.2 units on that one. And we keep moving. Next one I'm talking about is going to be a really fun one. South Dakota State at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's 9.5 point favorites in this one. The over-under is 54.5, which is high for an FBS to FCS rival, but there's a reason for it. South Dakota State is the two-time defending FCS champions. They've been on a roll lately. They went 15-0 last year. They're just a damn good team. Their quarterback, what the hell did I write there? I screwed that up. I'll give the quarterback, Mark Gronowski. I think that's how you say it. He comes back after a big season last year. He threw for over 3,000 yards. He had a 29-5 touchdown to interception ratio. He also rushed for over 400 yards and 8 touchdowns, which I think could be a huge factor in this game against Oklahoma State. Anytime an FCS team has a quarterback that can run the ball, it's going to help them out, especially if he can throw like obviously he did last year in the FCS. But they are in Boone Pickens Stadium, which makes you think, tough environment, probably going to be tougher. The underdog has won 7 of the last 10 games at Boone Pickens Stadium, which is kind of nuts, especially considering how good Oklahoma State's been the past couple of years. So they've been the favorites over, most of the teams they've played at home, which means the underdogs are beating Oklahoma State at Boone's Pickens. So I thought that was kind of nuts. Another reason why I like the Jackrabbits is their defense. 8 of the top 13 tacklers are coming back for South Dakota State this year. And their defense last year gave up an average of 9.3 points per game, which is nuts. So they're going to be really good on defense. They got a really good quarterback that can throw and run. Just another good team that's probably going to have a great chance of winning the FCS again this year. That being said, on the other side of the ball, Oklahoma State, they're coming off a 10-4 season last year. They lost to Texas in the Big 12 championship. They're going to have a good team this year too. Alan Bowman coming back for his 7th season at quarterback for the Cowboys. He threw for 3,400 yards last year, but he did throw 14 interceptions to only 15 touchdowns. So he turns the ball over a lot. And I think the Jackrabbits have a shot of taking advantage of that in this game. Obviously, though, the bell cow for the Cowboys offense is Ollie Gordon. Probably the best running back in the country this year. Maybe Quinshon Judkins beats him out. So probably top 3. We'll say top 3. Rushed for over 1,700 yards last season, 21 touchdowns. He's probably going to do that again this year. If Oklahoma State wins this game, and especially if they cover, he's going to have a crazy game. So if any of you are in states where you can bet player props, I would absolutely bet Ollie Gordon, whatever his yards are, over that. And I'd probably bet him 2+ touchdowns too, because he's going to be their offense, I think, for a lot of this. My pick for this game, though, is South Dakota State plus 9.5. It's even money, so I'm throwing a unit on it. I just think they have a great shot here. I think Oklahoma State could come out a little bit flat. South Dakota State's going to be hyped up for this game. 15-0 season last year. You know they're going to keep that pace for this year. It just seems like a great spot for the Jackrabbits. And yeah, for y'all in the chat talking about North Dakota State, South Dakota State, I actually have both of them covering the spread. I did North Dakota State on my part 1, so if you missed that one, check that out. But yeah, I think they both cover. I don't think North Dakota State wins. Like I said, if you want the full breakdown of this game, go to part 1. But I do think Colorado wins by 4. That's my prediction for that game. South Dakota State, I think, has the better chance of actually winning outright. They, to me, are just, obviously, they're the more solid team. And I also think that they just fit better against the team they're playing against. You know, South Dakota State is kind of built to stop the run and get turnovers, which is what Oklahoma State, you know, they want to run the ball and not turn the ball over. And then on the other side, with the North Dakota State game, that game is purely strength versus speed, which could cause some issues in actually grabbing the win. So, but I do agree, one of them is probably going to get the upset. I like South Dakota State for it. I'll probably sprinkle a little bit on the money line. So, yeah, see, this is why I don't know if North Dakota State actually gets the win. I think they keep it close with their physicality, but Colorado can score a touchdown in one play and, you know, bust it open. Whereas with South Dakota State, because Oklahoma State relies on the run game so much, and because South Dakota State just has a really good defense and a really good offense, I think they're just going to keep it closer throughout the entire game. Whereas North Dakota State at some point could be playing backup to get it back to being close. So next game I'm going to talk about is Miami at Florida. This is another one of those big games that everyone seems to be talking about, and for good reason. The spread is 2.5 favored to Miami. The over-under is 54.5, which seems a little high, but I guess it makes sense. And yeah, I mean, this should be a good game. I'm leaning Miami, and I have 3 reasons why I'm leaning Miami. The first one is pretty obvious. Miami bought their entire team this year. They spent more NIL money than a white woman in Target to make sure that they had a good team. So, yeah, I mean, they got some good guys. They also brought in Cam Ward from Washington State, who threw 48 touchdowns and ran for another 13 in his 2 years there. Cam Ward is going to be really good. And he also has Xavier Restrepo to throw it to this year, which I really like. And I think that's just going to be a really good connection. They also have some other guys on that side of the ball that he can throw it to. It's not just Restrepo. Obviously, like I said, they brought in a ton of guys. So he's going to have more than him to throw it to. I just think Restrepo is going to be the guy. On Florida side of the ball, yes, they do have home field advantage. Obviously, the Swamp is a tough place to play. Miami, though, is probably the one team that's not going to be affected by the Swamp as much as other teams. You know, they play down in Miami. It's just as hot there. Obviously, the crowd is going to be a factor, but they don't have to deal with the heat and the bullshit like a lot of other teams do that come into Florida. So I don't think the Swamp is going to be as big of an advantage against Miami as it is against a lot of other schools. I also don't trust Graham Mertz. I don't think he's a good quarterback. I don't think he's a guy that'll go out and win you the game. I will say he doesn't turn the ball over. He completes over 70% of his passes. So he's not a guy that's going to throw a whole bunch of picks and cause you to lose a game, but I don't think he's a guy that can win you a game like Cam Ward is. That being said, 70% completion rate is pretty damn good. He also got a couple of guys to help him out on the offensive side of the ball. They're going, Arliss Boardingham, I think is his name. Could be Airless. Tight end. He's going to be pretty good. He's going to give some matchup problems for Miami. They also brought in Eugene Wilson. He's going to be pretty big for him too. I don't think it's going to be enough to win, but I do think that they're going to score a lot of points. So I'm actually not touching the spread in this one because I agree with Brian. It is a hard one to cap, especially first game of the season. But I like the over. So I'm betting over 54.5 at minus 110 for 1.1 units. Like I said, the spread, I'm leaning Miami minus 2.5. But Florida could easily win this game. You know, their coach is on the hot seat. There's a very good chance that he gets fired, especially if they lose this or get blown out in this in the first game. They're going to throw everything they can at Miami and hope something sticks. And Miami, you know, with Cam Ward, with their good offensive line, with Damian Martinez coming in from Oregon State, they're going to have the guys to score anyway. I think this is a high-scoring game. So over 54.5, minus 110. I really like that one a lot. All right, got a few left. This one is not as fun, but I had to talk about this game because never in my life did I think I would be talking about UMass, and here I am talking about UMass. Eastern Michigan at UMass. Eastern Michigan is 2.5-point dogs to the UMass Minutemen. The over-under is 50.5. If there's one thing you can rely on every single year, it's that UMass is going to suck. And they were 3-9 last year, so they sucked. But they still won 3 games last year, which for UMass, to me, is nuts because they've been so bad. This is their last year as an independent. They do go into the MAC next year. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for them because they're going to lose either way. But this team has a lot of question marks. I have no idea how to say their quarterback's name. It sounds like an Egyptian pharaoh. Tyson Fomachan. I'm going to go with that. It's probably wrong. The Egyptian pharaoh. He's their quarterback for this game, but there's a very good chance that he's not their quarterback after this game. He's basically playing for his job. So we'll kind of see how that goes there. That's pretty much it. I mean, a lot of new guys on this team, and their defense was basically non-existent last year. Their pass rush was awful. Their secondary was bad. They just don't think they're going to be a good team. On the other side, Eastern Michigan, they weren't a whole lot better. They were 6-7 last year. But they do expect to be over 500 this year. They bring in Cole Snyder from Buffalo, who's a big upgrade at quarterback. And he's also got NC State transfer Porter Rooks to throw to, so that'll help him out even more. So the passing game should be pretty good for Eastern Michigan this year. But EMU's defense also sucked last year. Also had a terrible pass rush last year. But they did bring in some transfer guys that should kind of beef them up a little bit on the D line. So maybe that helps them out a little bit. What I'm getting at here is this game's going to be a fucking mess, but I think Eastern Michigan pulls it out. I have to fade UMass. I just have to fade UMass. But even if it wasn't UMass and it was just 2 blank teams with the teams that they have on paper, I would still go Eastern Michigan. So Eastern Michigan plus 2.5, minus 104. So I'm going to throw 1.1 units on that one as well. But it's going to be an ugly game. I'd probably lean the over too, 50.5. Probably going to be right around there, but I would probably lean the over on that one. All right. Next game, I got Miami of Ohio at Northwestern. Northwestern's 3.5-point favorites in this one, and the over-under is 39.5. A lot of people are betting Northwestern in this game. It's one of the higher spread percentages on the books that I've seen so far, which is kind of nuts to me because Miami's a good team. They won 11-3 last year. They finished first in the MAC. They returned quarterback Brett Gabbert, who's probably going to be the best quarterback in the MAC this season. They grabbed a receiver and a tight end in the portal to replace their leading receiver from last year. And they have 4 of their 5 offensive linemen back as well. Their offense is going to be good. And their defense wasn't terrible last year either. They're also 7th in red zone defense and 14th in red zone offense last year, which is crazy to be on both sides of the ball like that. So I think they're going to be a really good team this year, and I think they got a chance against Northwestern. Northwestern went 8-5 last year, but their offense was not an 8-5 team. Their offense was bad. They do bring in transfer Mike Wright at quarterback, which could improve them a little bit, and they return 2 of their top 3 receivers, their top running back, and their O-line. I believe it was 3 of 5 on the O-line. But just because you bring back a bunch of guys that was on a shit offense last year doesn't mean they're going to be better. They were shit last year. Why are they going to be better this year? So I'm going with Miami plus 3.5, minus 122 on that one. So I'm going to put 1.25 units on this one just to get that unit back. That's how I like to bet it. Like I've said in the past, do what you want with your units if you're betting these. Don't just do it because I said so. But that's what I want to do with it. But yeah. I'm not fading the public here because the public's on it, but I am unintentionally fading the public because a lot of people are seeing this game and just going, oh, Big Ten against a MAC school. Obviously, the Big Ten school is going to win. And then they don't look at Northwestern not being able to move the ball at all on offense and basically just relying on their defense, which is not going to work with this Northwestern team, especially against the Miami of Ohio school that was actually pretty damn good last year. So yeah, I really like the plus 3.5, and I'm definitely sprinkling Miami of Ohio money line too. All right, I got 2 games left, and then I'm gonna go watch football, like I'm sure the rest of y'all are. Boise State at Georgia Southern. Boise State is 12.5-point favorites on this one. The over/under is 57.5. Just looking at this one on paper, you would expect Boise State to just win this in a blowout, and that'd be the end of it. But I don't think Georgia Southern's going to be that bad this year. They are playing a new quarterback in J.C. French, who's a sophomore. He got a little bit of playing time last year, but he didn't get enough to really impact him that much. But he does have a good group of receivers to throw to, and Derwin Burgess, Dalen Cobb, and they brought in a transfer from Auburn. Almost said Oregon. It's Auburn. Tight end Tyler Fromm, which will help him out a lot too. They didn't have a lot of success in the run game, though. They ranked 102nd in the FBS in the run game, so they'll definitely need to improve there, and I don't know if they will. They just didn't really do much to improve it. And their defense wasn't great last year either, but that one I think they actually can improve. They'll have some experience there from last year, and they're really deep on the defensive side of the ball, which obviously helps on defense because you can just get guys that aren't tired in there. So they will be better on defense. But if the pass rush doesn't improve, they're going to get blown out of this because they were not good at pass rush last year, which seems to be a common theme in the games that I picked for this. But, I don't know. What can you do? Yeah. On the other side of the ball, Boise State, obviously, for anybody that's paid attention, they're expected to probably be one of the best group of 5 teams this year. For good reason. They got a lot of good players. They did lose their quarterback from last year, but I don't know how much that's going to hurt them. They have 2 guys that they can use this year. They said they're starting Maddox Madsen, who's a sophomore that was on the team last year in this game against Southern. But they also brought in Malachi Nelson from USC. And if Madsen slips up at any point, I would say they probably go to Nelson unless there's just something that the team knows that we don't. But as I've said in the past, any kind of quarterback competition like that, I think makes both of them better. So I think that helps them more than it does hurt them. They also have Ashton Jaunty. I'm so bad at names, man. Ashton Jaunty. I'm going to go with that. That they'll probably lean on pretty heavily in this game. He's coming off a 1,300-yard season with 14 touchdowns, and he's got a really good offensive line in front of him. So against a terrible defensive line that Georgia Southern has, I would say this is probably going to be a Ashton Jaunty heavy game for Boise State. So again, if you're in a player prop state, which I'm fucking not, I would probably do Ashton Jaunty's rushing yards and definitely do his anytime touchdown. That being said, I am betting for Boise State. Jesus Christ, I can't talk. I'm going to say Florida State there. Boise State minus 12.5, minus 115. I'm going to put 1.2 units on that one. I think Boise State probably wins this by 2 or 3 touchdowns. Georgia Southern's going to be a decent team probably as the season progresses, but week 1, their defense is most likely going to struggle, and their new quarterback is probably going to make a couple of mistakes. So I don't think they have a chance here. But like I said, I mean, as the season progresses, they're probably going to get better. They're probably going to be a middle of the pack Sun Belt team this year, which you couldn't say for them in the past. And last game of my slate, North Texas at South Alabama. And this one is going to be a shootout, which is awesome because everybody loves scoring. The spread is South Alabama minus 6.5. The over-under is 64.5. And this is basically just two good offenses that don't play defense at all. North Texas had an elite offense last year. I think they put up like 36 a game on average. They're hoping to repeat that this year. They're pretty much going to have to because their defense is going to struggle. They bring in Chandler Morris at quarterback from TCU. He threw for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns with 5 interceptions. They have 2 running backs that should give them production in, oh my God, Akaika. I don't know. Y'all tell me. Y'all try to do this shit. Ikaka Ragsdale. He's returning from last year. A Minnesota transfer, Zach Evans, is also there at running back now. So they're going to have some guys to go on the ground with Chandler Morris throwing it. They also bring back their best receiver from last year, or not best, but one of their top receivers from last year, Damon Ward, who should be pretty good in the passing game. But they have a very young secondary on defense, and they're probably going to struggle really bad early in the season because they're young, and then progressively, maybe, hopefully get better as the season goes. South Alabama brings in Gio Lopez at quarterback. He got some playing time last year for them, but again, not a lot to really make a difference. So he's basically new for them. They lost their top receiver in Colin Lacey, but they do still have a lot of production in the wide receiver room. So that's not as massive as a loss as it could have been. And South Alabama does have a better defense than North Texas does. They bring back a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball from last year. They also bring in Wykevius Thomas, which I hope I'm saying it right, because if his name's Wykevius, that's an awesome ass name. He's the anchor of their defense, so bringing him back is obviously going to help. They also brought in Gavin Forsha, I think it's Forsha, from Kansas, who's projected to probably be one of the best linebackers in the conference. So that'll help him out as well. But that being said, I don't think they stop this North Texas offense. They may stifle them a little bit, but North Texas is going to score. They're going to move the ball. That's what they do. I think South Alabama probably keeps up with them a little bit. So even though I would probably lean South Alabama to cover this, I'm betting over 64.5, minus 105. I'm putting 1.1 units on it. I think this is going to be a shootout, like I said earlier. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, and I wouldn't be surprised if this over is close to cashing at halftime. I really wouldn't. So that's what I got for this slate. Like I said, if you missed part 1, go back and check that one out for me. I would appreciate it. It would mean a lot to me. I am doing part 3, which is the Saturday night slate and the Sunday game and Monday game. I'll be doing those tomorrow afternoon, probably around the same time as today. So make sure to watch out for that one. Give this video a like for me because I'd appreciate that. It helps me out. And subscribe if you haven't already, because why haven't you done that already? I need it. And yeah, I appreciate y'all for hanging out. Make sure to check out the next one.